Hey, a trip to the supermarket or a fill up at the gas pump, it offers a painfully clear view of inflation. Prices are rising, cash flow, retirement account not going as far as it used to. You don't need me to tell you about all the headlines of the economy. Here's the advice. You've got to learn strategies to help protect yourself and your cash flow and your standard of living. I recommend you do what I do, which is to rely on Steve Cordasco, John Walker, and the team at Mercer Advisors. Call them at 855-558-3500, 855-558-3500. Mercer Global Advisors. That's an SEC registered investment advisor. Securities are offered through Andrew Garrett Inc., which is not affiliated with Mercer Advisors. And now it is time for the headlines from Smerconish.com, the newsletter. I want to begin, TC, with all of the survey results because it's been a while since I've been here live behind this microphone. It was last Thursday. I had off on Friday. Yesterday, of course, was a holiday. So a very quick run through of where we've been. Thursday, the question was this: should law enforcement enforce whatever the outcome of the SCOTUS decision, Roe versus Wade, might be? 51-49 said no. Now, what was the background here? The background here, and I had a great guest on CNN on Saturday in John Tierney, a former attorney general, in his case of Maine. Now he lectures at Harvard Law School. And the subject was discretion. And I think that many people have not fully recognized that in a post-Roe world, there is tremendous discretion that will be exercised on a state and local level. We had in our backyard. Township, right? Your township saying, we're not going to let the police all of a sudden enforce a stringent anti-abortion law, even though, of course, Radnor has no abortion clinic, and I can't envision that they ever would have one.
Right.
But it was a good example of politics being local. Okay, Friday, right. Thank you, Dr. Maz, for so ably holding down the fort. 12,539 votes, a great survey question. Will the January 6 hearings decrease the number of people that believe the election result was fraudulent? 57% say yes, meaning it's having an impact, and that it is decreasing the number of people who believe that the election result was fraudulent. Saturday, 18,499 votes. Do the benefits of artificial intelligence outweigh the dangers? Another great CNN guest in James Bassett, who wrote a book. Remember, this is the whole issue about James Burgoyne, Lambda, the Google engineer. He thinks there's sentience on the part of artificial intelligence, at least in that instance. Do the benefits outweigh the dangers? 50.13 to 49.87. That's how close it was. Sunday, does Mike Pence's role on January 6th make it more or less likely that he will ever be elected president? 61% say less likely. Now, isn't that interesting? Because Mike Pence, his conduct, he's not testifying. That's a shortcoming of his. But the review, the assessment, the view that you get of Mike Pence as a result of what we've learned about January 6th is favorable. I mean, this is the guy who failed to bend to all the cajoling, all the browbeating by President Donald Trump. So, wow, wouldn't you think, hey, he's an American hero, he's more likely. But no, our voters, more than 10,000 of them, say it makes him less likely, and probably because he can't placate the base. That's what I read into that result. And then finally, yesterday, do you agree with FINA's vote to restrict the participation of transgender athletes, including Leah Thomas, in women's events? 88% of more than 11,000 said yes. TC, what is her status, Leah Thomas, relative to the Olympics, if this is a ruling about international competition?
So she would not be eligible for the Olympics. This would negate that. It's all the elite levels, and she would not be able to compete. But the story is that they'll have some sort of open category. Now, would that be for the Olympics? I don't know the answer to that.
So you didn't like the draft of yesterday's survey question, and you said to me, let's air that out. You thought that the wording of it might be problematic because in the way that I initially wrote it, I said, do you agree with FINA's vote to restrict the participation of transgender athletes, including Leah Thomas? I had biological female in there somewhere. Then you said make it cisgender, and then it just got too complicated, and we went with this.
Right. I am so it's not that I'm sort of trying to be PC or woke or any of those things. It's more that I just want to be respectful and use the right terminology. And I think that sometimes there's very subtle anti-trans when you sort of question, like, oh, are you sure? Or are a real woman or something like that. And I would just never want to even bend toward that. It's purely a respect thing.
Well,
it has nothing to do with being woke or being
shocked.
Whatever.
I was shocked that 88%, so decisive, said they think that FINA got it right. And of course, today's survey question, does the Eric Greitens rhino hunting commercial, you can watch it on my Facebook page, increase or decrease his chance of being elected to the U.S. Senate? When I was on New Day on CNN early this morning, I said to John Berman, do you remember the quote, "Go sell crazy someplace else. We're all stocked up here"? Of course, it was Jack Nicholson in Something's Gotta Give. Was it Something's Gotta Give? What was the movie? All of a sudden, I've a mental block.
It was a great. It was a great quote.
So what I also said was, I remember, and I'm sure you remember, when Eric Greitens came in studio about a decade ago. And the subtitle of the book, because I think this is really even more important than the title of the book, the subtitle was "The Education of a Humanitarian." He was billing himself as a humanitarian, as a tough guy, Navy SEAL, but also as a humanist and a humanitarian. What happened to him?
He was so impressive.
Impressive.
When he left your studio, Michael, I thought, this is a leader.
Yeah.
And then
this is a future president.
Yes.
But such is the behavior of the, I mean, I also tied together, and I'll say something about this in a moment. I also tied together on television this morning the fact that the reason Pence isn't testifying in front of the January 6th committee is tied to Eric Greitens' appeal in this rhino hunting, appalling commercial that he put out, because Pence isn't testifying because he's afraid of alienating the very people that Greitens is trying to cultivate in that commercial. But listen, the Greitens commercial is not the most interesting video that has been released since we were last together. The most interesting video released since we were last together is my video from my Instagram account yesterday.
And by the way, I would much rather look at that video than the Eric Greitens hunting rhino video. Yeah, the response is so heartwarming and moving, truly. Tell me about the cemetery visit and about truly going full circle. It's like a closure.
Yes. So yesterday was a 4 cemetery day for me.
Oh my.
A 4 cemetery day for me. I shall explain. But it was a day to pay respects to a lot of relatives. My mother was with me. We visited the grave site of her husband. We went to her parents' grave. We visited a lot of graves yesterday. And then I finished the day at my father's grave site because I hadn't visited it for Father's Day. And I delivered to my dad that which you'll see in the Instagram video, me delivering to my great-grandfather. Okay, what's the story? I'll tell it quickly because I've already told it, but I love telling it. A month ago, I was in southeast Poland, 12 miles from the Slovakia border, an hour's drive from Ukraine, visiting the remnants of a village where my great-grandfather emigrated from, left in the 1880s to come to the United States. And the village doesn't remain. You can watch different things in my social media that I recorded when I was there, but there's a stream and a little stream bed right there adjacent to a cemetery in what was the village where my great-grandfather, paternal great-grandfather, came to the United States. So I brought home a couple of pebbles, and I had it in mind, and yesterday was the day, because of Juneteenth and the holiday at SiriusXM, that I finally was able to do this. So I took one of the stones, as people who are Jewish do in tribute at cemeteries. I took one of the stones from that riverbed from Swatova Ruska, and I placed it on the tombstone of my great-grandfather, which was kind of, as TC says, bringing the whole story full circle. So it was really, really special, and you can watch it on my Instagram page. Okay, so Eric Greitens' video is the survey question of the day. Something else interesting to pay attention to is the social media reaction to all of this. Facebook removed the video for violating its violence and incitement policies. YouTube left the video up but said that it won't let it run as an ad. And as Brian Stelter reported in his Reliable Sources newsletter, Twitter allowed the video to stay on the platform, but put a label noting that it determined that it may be in the public's best interest for the tweet to remain accessible. So it sounds like Twitter, with an eye toward Elon Musk perhaps being the future owner, tried to play Solomon in all of this. That probably benefits Eric Greitens, because Eric Greitens then gets to say, oh, look at this. Social media is shutting me down. I'm running against Silicon Valley and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Big day today for the January 6th committee. Brad Raffensperger probably is the headline witness who will testify today. Of course, Raffensperger brings to mind the 11,780. That is the number of votes, as I recall, that Donald Trump asked him to just please find. These committee hearings continue, and with some impact. I mean, I said that one of our survey questions asked whether it makes it more or less likely that Pence gets the nomination. Let's talk for a moment about Trump in 2024 and Ron DeSantis in 2024. Piers Morgan, and you know that Piers just had that interview with Donald Trump that got a lot of attention. Piers writes a column for the New York Post today that we put up at Smerconish.com, and it's in the newsletter. Memo to Republicans: it's time to dump the Donald and run with the Ronald. The once omnipotent GOP beast bestriding the American political world like a paw-crunching King Kong is now seeing his stranglehold over the party ebb away faster than the infamous gorilla tumbled to his demise from the Empire State Building after being shot by U.S. Navy jets. And the same foe is proving to be the deadly weapon again now in the form of Florida Governor Ron DeSantis, a U.S. Navy war hero who advised SEAL team commanders in Iraq and who still serves with the U.S. Navy Reserve. Says Piers Morgan, I won't read the whole column, if you were scripting a perfect Republican presidential candidate, the list of preferred requirements would read something like DeSantis's resume. He's a man from humble beginnings, raised in Dunedin, Florida by working-class parents. His father installed Nielsen TV ratings boxes, and his mother was a nurse. And then it goes on to quote his first-grade teacher. He was bright, very, very attentive. I knew he would do his work. I knew he would pay attention. I knew I could trust him. That's first-grade teacher to the Miami Herald. So, and Trump, more and more on the attack. I think there's a good Hill story that we posted today at Smerconish.com, and it's in the newsletter. Trump ratchets up attacks amid questions about his presidential visibility. I also thought that, in line with conversations that I had here last week with Danny Savalos, I had a great television guest on Saturday in Renato Mariotti. Renato Mariotti, who's a former prosecutor, now Chicago-based, wrote a great piece for Politico magazine assessing, what's necessary for there to be a prosecution of Donald Trump. TC, I've already talked about it, but we can briefly talk about it again. Of course, Renato Mariotti, the guest on CNN who got all the attention on Saturday, that was Mrs. George Conway.
That is correct. And she would like to be referred to as that, I think, for sure. Michael, I have never had, and I can say this with absolute certainty, the hatred that came out from the time you tweeted that you were going to have Kellyanne Conway through the program to the time when you had Kellyanne Conway, because she was your last guest, was astonishing. Astonishing. And I would say 99.9% universally against you having her on at all.
So as I told you, it makes me seriously contemplate inviting her again next weekend.
How to get Michael to do something.
Oh, yeah.
Tell him you don't want him to do it.
Exactly. Absolutely. Absolutely. But I played the audio. I mean, I thought that she was a good guest. She filibusters, but look at the attention that the interview received. I mean, I as you well know, because this is kind of a curious thing. I look at my iPhone. I have the CNN app on my iPhone. And later on a Saturday, after I catch my breath after the show, I'll go and I'll look at the CNN app to see what, if any, elements have been included from my program.
Sure.
They had in very prominent position the Kellyanne Conway interview. And TC, there are no favors done. This is all metrics driven.
All claim.
CNN.com on the laptop, on a desktop, had nothing about my interview with Kellyanne Conway. But wait, by Sunday, it was leading, maybe number 2. And you know, that CNN website is the number 1 or number 2 news website in the world. Again, all metrics driven. They put at the top whatever people are clicking on.
Well, and that was what I said to you post show. I said, I'll be really interested to see the ratings, because if the number of people on Twitter who said, I'm tuning you out, I'm not watching, I'm either not watching today or I'm never watching again, if that number of people actually tune out, maybe there'll be this huge drop off when Kellyanne Conway comes on, or for the show itself. That is not playing itself out online. I'll be very interested to see what happened that morning.
I mean, the Daily Mail had it as a lead item, that my interview with her, because of the questions that I asked about her relationship for the whole weekend.
Well, I thought she was most forthcoming about the marriage to you, more so than she has been in other interviews I've seen.
One other thing I want to circle pertaining to trying again, of course, to be an equal opportunity offender. Read the Wall Street Journal editorial today that we appended at Smerconish.com. It's all about Joe Biden's age, breaking the Biden age taboo. It talks about how the campaign in which he defeated Donald Trump, the 2020 campaign, the rest of the campaign was a long apologia for Mr. Biden's strategy of limiting his public exposure by campaigning in his Delaware basement. COVID-19 was the perfect excuse, and woe to any journalist who dared ask if Mr. Biden wasn't the same man we knew as vice president. The subject was taboo. This was one of the great free campaign passes in history. Listen to this part. Ronald Reagan's age was a subject of agonized media concern when he ran for president at age 69 in 1980. He was roasted after he stumbled in the first debate against Walter Mondale in 1984, and he had to diffuse the media and public doubts with a quip about Mondale's youth and inexperience in the next decade. Here's the takeaway. The Gipper was 3 weeks shy of 78 when he left office, which was younger than Mr. Biden was when he entered the Oval Office. I mean, look, I did that commentary in May about whether, and I didn't, I said he's not running, and we all know he's not running. He ought to say so sooner than later. And people were fit to be tied about it. Now, New York Times, Washington Post, all of these major outlets, all running stories about the discomfort within the Democratic Party and the prospect that Biden doesn't run, setting off, all the jockeying behind the position. Final story, and I there's so many things here. I haven't even said a word about Ukraine, but we've got good Ukraine coverage on the website and in the newsletter today. But from Uvalde, a city police officer armed with an AR-15 style rifle hesitated when he had a brief chance to shoot the gunman approaching the school in Uvalde, Texas. There were at least 2 opportunities to take this guy out before he ever even entered the school. And of course, the big story today that we've learned is that officers with heavier firepower and tactical equipment were there within 19 minutes. That's earlier than previously known. We are still learning. And now we're seeing images of law enforcement in the hallway inside the school. We are still seeing images and learning things that we did not know previously about the shooting in Uvalde. Today's survey question at Smerconish.com, I assume that the POTUS audience is aware of and has seen the Greitens commercial. Watch it on my Facebook page. Does the Eric Greitens rhino hunting commercial increase or decrease his chance of being elected to the U.S. Senate? It's appalling, but might it help him? Go vote, register for the daily newsletter. See you tomorrow.